Colleen here, DIYer behind LemonThistle.com, and today I'm excited to share how to make this DIY macrame chandelier with you guys. So I actually made this like a year ago for an outdoor tablescape. I recorded the steps as I was going, but I wasn't great at making videos then, and I was concerned that the how to tie the knots didn't come across really clearly. So I never did put the video together. But recently I made an introduction to macrame knots. So if you want to know how to make the knots in here, watch that video first. I go over the main knots that you'll need for this. This actually only uses the square knot, the half square knot or the spiral knot, and then the hitch. And then I also made some tassels, which is essentially just like tying a bunch of string in a knot. So I originally made this for an outdoor tablescape, which I thought looked so beautiful, but when we moved, our outdoor table doesn't have a tree over top of it anymore, and my daughter had told me how much she loves it and how she wanted me to make one for her own room. So we thought, we'll just move it into her room instead of doing this all over again. So last year when we made over her room into this beautiful pink space that we're in right now, this was one of the starting points for our design. If you want to see the whole room, I have a whole video tour. I will link to that below for you guys. All right, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would so love if you did that below so you don't miss out on any more DIY or home decor videos. Let's do this. All right, so to get started, you're going to take your larger hoop and you're going to start cutting your macrame strings to size. So for this, I am just using cotton twine. I will link to the exact one that I use in the description, but I just cut them taller than I was and then doubled that length because I wanted to make sure that I had enough length for this to add all the knots in that I wanted to without it getting too short. I think that it ended up being about 4 arm lengths for me. So as you stretch it out, just do 4 arm lengths, give it a cut, and then cut all of your pieces the same size. So to add them onto your hoop, you're going to want to fold them in half. So just do that by pinching the ends together and then following that all the way to the end where you find the fold. Take that fold, tuck it underneath your hoop, loop it over and pull the ends all the way through until it's tight and looped on there. You're going to want to do this 4 times before you move on to the next section. And then you do that all the way around your hoop. So just keep going. So again, you fold your long string in half and you loop it underneath your hoop and pull the ends through. As I was doing this, I also found that it was much easier to tie off each section of 4 into just like a large loose knot to keep them from getting tangled up with the other sections of string, or else you're just going to be untangling macrame cord the entire time. I did a total of 8 sections, but in hindsight, I would have really loved to do more. Make sure that you add 2 at a time because you do end up joining 2 together as we work down the macrame. Okay, I just wanted to remind you that this video was taken so long ago. So if you're having trouble understanding the knots that I'm showing you, I made a video that shows you exactly how to do the 3 knots that I'm doing for this project, and it's gonna break those down. So I would watch that first, understand those 3 knots, and then come back here, and as I'm explaining how to use those knots in this combination, it should be pretty easy to follow along. All right, so once you have all of your strings on there and kind of tied in little packages so that you don't get them knotted up while you're working, let's get started on one of those sections of 4. So we're going to work with a square knot here, which is one of the most basic knots. If you did friendship bracelets when you were a kid, you know how to do a square knot, and it's going to come back to you very, very quickly. So you're going to take 2 of those loops, so 4 out of your 8 strings, and you're going to do a square knot. So for a square knot, you take the string on the left, you fold it over the 2 strings in the middle, and then you take the string on the right, you put it over top of that one you folded over, tuck it under the 2 strings in the middle and pop it out that corner. And then you pull it nice and tight, and then you do the opposite. You take the string on the right, you put it over, take the string on the left, put it over that string you folded over, tuck it underneath the 2 in the middle and pop it out the right. And then you pull it tight. That's what makes a square knot. So it's actually 2 knots in one. Then you're gonna do that to the other 4 strings that are left in your section. And then once you've done a square knot over there, you're gonna take the 4 strings in the middle, so 2 from each of your square knots, and you're gonna make those into a square knot as well. You're gonna keep going with this pattern where you do 2 knots and then you take the 2 strings from the center and you do 1 knot, and then you go back out to the outside and you do 2 knots. And you can do that as long as you want to. We're eventually gonna join these in together. For my design, I did 4. So I did the 2 and 1 as one set, and I did 4 of those sets. You're gonna wanna do this to all 8 of your sections or more if you've done more before moving on to the next step. And oh, hey, look, I noticed that there's crumbs and I cleaned them out. That's good, good for me. Oh man. So now we're gonna join 2 of those sections together. So you can see this is how the square knots look after they've been done. And again, that's doing 4 sets of the 3 square knots. So at this point, I realized that having it on the floor wasn't gonna work as I was joining 2 together on a circular surface like this hoop. So I put it on top of a stool, which you can see didn't work very great. But honestly, I don't know that I have a better solution. If you don't have one of those like rolling clothes racks, that would be the best. So we're gonna go into the double half hitch to make these diamond patterns. So again, you can go back to my introduction to macrame knots, which has a slow and very detailed, with drawn instructions even, tutorial on how to do these 3 knots that we're using in this macrame pattern. So you start at the outside corner of one of your sections and you start doing the double half hitch on diagonal down to the other edge of that section. So I started on the right hand section and I worked my way right to left. So a double half hitch is made by taking a traveling string and placing it on diagonal if you're traveling on diagonal like we are, and then taking the next string in the series and looping it over. So the traveling string will be your very outside string that you're crossing over, and it will be traveling to the other side of your section. So you place this over top on diagonal, you take the next string, you loop it from underneath, over top, and through that little pocket that it creates and pull it through. Doing this twice will lock the knot, and then you can move on to the next piece. And so that's why it's called a double half hitch, because you do that hitch motion 2 times. So it's a double half knot. So you do this all the way on diagonal for one of your sections, and then you take the section beside it and you do it on the opposite diagonal so they come to a point and meet together. Then you're going to join the 2 of them together just by taking those traveling strings and knotting them. I just did it like a double half hitch, but it's essentially just tying a knot. So you can do that, and then we're going to continue our pattern of double half hitch to make diamonds. So we're going to keep that traveling string going all the way across your other section that you've just joined it up with until you get to the outside of that section. You'll do the same on the other side as well. Okay, and then I had to leave this clip in because it just made me laugh. This is what crafting with kids and with babies is like all the time, you guys. But look at how tiny he is. Oh my gosh, you guys, he is like running and climbing and going down slides now. I just wish that they would stay a little longer. Man, oh man. Okay, back to macrame. Okay, so after you've finished the top half of your diamond shape, then I wanted to put some detail in the center of the diamond. So I just did 1 square knot using the center 4 strands in this diamond, and I tried to level it so that it sat at the outside corners of the diamond so that it was centered in there. And then once I'd done that 1 square knot, I started doing the bottom half of my diamond with a double half hitch going the opposite way. So taking that outside string and traveling again back towards the center for the bottom half of the diamond. One thing that I will say that I have found as I've done more macrame, this is one of the first macrame projects I ever did, is to watch your tension. You can see that there's some different sizes of knots in the double half hitch, and it's really important to get an even tension, especially when you want to do a sharp corner like the outside of this diamond. It just makes the strings lay so much flatter. Flatter, is that a word? But it makes them lay so much nicer if you pay attention to your tension. It's kind of like crochet or like knitting, which I'm also terrible at. So something to consider. So you just join up the bottom of the diamond just by knotting those traveling strings together. All right, so now that we've done these sections, now you want to join those together to make it into a chandelier instead of just into different sections. So to tie it together, take the outside 2 strings from each section that are close to each other, and you can do a square knot to attach them. The trick with this first one is to pay attention to your tension and how far apart that square knot is from each of the different sections. So we're going to kind of alternate back and forth, kind of like we did in the first section, using these square knots, except we're leaving quite a bit of space in between the square knots. And we're going to kind of create a little bit of a net like this, and we're going to do this in a triangle pattern. So we're only going to use half of the strings from each of the diamonds. So you'll see that I'm alternating back and forth with square knots, splitting the square knot in 2 and taking the 2 threads from the left hand and taking 2 new threads from the diamond and making those into a square knot, doing the same on the other side, and then bringing it back together. This kind of creates a pattern, and again, we're doing this in a triangle until we use only half of the strings from each of the diamonds. Okay, once we're done the triangle, we're going to create a border on that using our double half hitch. So take the 2 strings that are next in line from your diamond, and to me those are the middle 2, and start doing a double half hitch. You're going to use the same string to do the half hitch all the way down. When you get to the first string from your first half knot in this triangle pattern that you've created, you'll incorporate that. And let me show you what I mean here. Okay, so you incorporate it just by switching to that new string that you've just come across for your half hitches. So you just drop the other one and you start where you left off with the new string that you've just met up with from your square knot triangle pattern. Since there are a couple strings for each of these square knots that you're going to run into, you can put a couple spaces in between them just to spread it out a little bit. And you can see how I did that here. So you'll do that all the way down on both sides, and then when you get down to the bottom, I just tied those traveling strings together just to finish it off and bring it into a nice triangle. All right, so up until this point, we have only used the square knot and the double half hitch. Now we're gonna switch to doing the spiral knot, or the half square knot as it's also called. Like the name suggests, you're just doing the first half of the square knot over and over and over and over, and that creates a spiral pattern. So in the square knot, we do it one way and then we do it the other way, and those 2 parts create the square knot. But in the spiral knot here, we just do the one way, the one direction, and we do that over and over and over, and it will spiral because we're not evening it out with the other side. So take your next 4 strings from your diamond and get going on those spiral knots. Again, this is one of the 3 knots that I went over in my beginner's tutorial for macrame, and I talked a lot about troubleshooting with the spiral knot. So if you're having issues, hop over and check out that video. I used this spiral knot cord and scalloped it down the sides of the triangle. You can kind of eyeball it and see how big you want your scallops to be. You'll see I'm kind of playing with it here. And once you have your spiral knot long enough to hook it up, go ahead and tie it to one of those strings that you've dropped off of your double half hitch edging on the triangle. So to scallop it in, what I did instead of knotting it, because the knotting would have interrupted the spiral knot pattern, I just incorporated the string that I wanted to scallop it onto into the half square knot. So I did this just by using it as one of the knots that I used to tie around the half square knot, and I added the one that I had been knotting into the center of the knot. Then I knotted 2 or 3 knots, and then I dropped it out the back side and continued knotting with that new string. And then continuing on your spiral knot until you want to add in your second scallop and your third. Then do it down the other side as well. When you get down to the bottom, I just used a regular knot and tied those 2 spiral knot scallops together, again, just to make the point of the triangle really nice and tight there. All right, so those last 4 strings that are left from your diamond, I am just making into another spiral knot cord, and I'm gonna do that on the other ones as well. So this will alternate between the triangle pattern joining together 2 of the strings and this double half knot or spiral knot pattern where we're kind of going to exit together and then cross back to the main triangles here. Again, when you're joining together two of these spiral knot cords, I just take the two pieces and I tie them in a knot. There might be a better way to do this, but it looks great to me, so I would say just keep it simple and do that. Okay, so at this point, I really liked the design, but I felt that it was a little bit see-through, like there wasn't enough mass to the piece to be a chandelier. So I think if I would have done more sections right off the get-go and not had them so spread out, that might have made it look fuller and I wouldn't have had to do this second piece. But I do really like how there's a second smaller embroidery hoop hanging inside, and this one is really simple to make. It will go super quick compared to your larger ring. So for this one, you'll just take long pieces of string and loop them over just like you did the first hoop and push two of those loops together so you have 4 strings for a square knot. And you'll do sections of 4 strings all the way around. And again, make sure that you have an even number so that they're easy to join together. And then you can start tying half knots at the top of each of those sections. Once you've tied a square knot at the top of each of those sections, you'll take 2 pieces from each section closest to one another and tie those together in a square knot as well. So this is the same pattern that we were doing with that triangle section on our larger hoop, but we're gonna do this all the way around just to come up with kind of a net. Now I am doing it flat on a table here. This is a great way to start off, but you will find you can only get so far before it can't sit flat because it has to be kind of a tube hanging down from your embroidery hoop. So I finished this piece off hanging from a tree in my backyard while my kids played. I don't have a good video of that because it was swinging around a little bit, but having it hang like this from something high, you can also cut your strings to the length that you want really easily. Having it hanging from the tree, I did the last couple steps as well. So I used scissors and I cut all of the strings to the length that I wanted. And then I went and added on tassels using the strings that I cut off, the longer pieces. And so once I added those tassels on, I thought it looked great, but I wanted to brush out the ends of the strings. So brushing out the ends, you can use a comb, you can use a hairbrush, you can just separate them with your fingers, whatever you like. All right, that is it. It only uses 3 knots for this entire piece, and it was really fun for me to create. This is the second macrame piece that I ever created, so I feel like if you can master these 3 knots, then there are so many different things that you can create. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more DIY or home decor videos. If you want to see more macrame from me and have questions on how to make certain things, pop those below so that I know as I'm planning my content what kind of things you want to see.